I came home early from my trip and found the office locked. Through the crack, I saw the unthinkable, and for 47 seconds, I did nothing but watch and count. 1, 2, 3.
Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching.
My son Jason, the boy Raymond and I had adopted 34 years ago, had strapped his father to the leather desk chair with industrial tape, the silver bands wrapped around Raymond's wrists, pinning them to the armrests. Another strip covered his mouth, muffling whatever pleas he was trying to make. 7, 8, 9. Jason was forcing a pen into Raymond's trembling hand, guiding it toward a stack of documents on the desk. His voice was low, controlled, almost gentle. "Just sign, Dad. It's easier if you just sign." 14, 15, 16. Gregory Simmons stood by the window, our family lawyer for 30 years. The man who had drawn up our wills, attended our anniversary parties, sent flowers when Raymond had his first heart surgery. He wasn't helping Raymond. He was looking at his watch, timing something. 22, 23, 24. Raymond's eyes were wet. Tears streamed down his weathered cheeks, soaking into the tape across his mouth. He was 70 years old. He had built houses for 40 years, raised 2 children, loved me for 4 decades. And now he sat helpless while our son tortured him. 30, 31, 32. I didn't scream. I didn't burst through the door. I didn't do any of the things a mother is supposed to do when she sees her child become a monster. Instead, I pulled my phone from my purse, opened the camera, and pressed record. 38, 39, 40. Through the crack in the door, I captured everything. Jason's hand on Raymond's, Gregory checking his watch, the documents on the desk, Raymond's silent tears. 45, 46, 47. I stopped recording and dialed 911. My voice was steady when I spoke, quieter than I had ever heard it. "I need police at 847 Maple Lane. My son is assaulting my husband. He has him restrained. Please hurry." The dispatcher asked me to stay on the line. I did. I stood in the hallway of my own home, listening to my son threaten my husband, and I waited for help to arrive. I was 62 years old. I had survived breast cancer, buried both my parents, weathered Raymond's heart problems, and built a successful consulting business from nothing. I had adopted a troubled 6-year-old boy from a group home and loved him as fiercely as I loved my biological daughter. I had given Jason everything I had, and now I stood outside a locked door, watching him try to steal everything his father owned. The police arrived in 11 minutes. They found me still standing in the hallway, phone pressed to my ear, eyes fixed on the crack in the door. They asked if I was all right. I told them my husband was inside, restrained with tape, and my son was forcing him to sign documents. They broke down the door. The scene inside was exactly as I had filmed it. Raymond strapped to the chair, tears still streaming. Jason standing over him with a pen. Gregory by the window, now pale as death, his expensive watch glinting in the lamplight. "Barbara," Jason said when he saw me. His voice was still calm, almost reasonable. "This isn't what it looks like." I said nothing. Dad wanted to update his will. He asked me to help. Gregory is here as a witness. The tape was just to keep him steady. His hands shake now, you know that. I still said nothing. The police officer asked Raymond if he wanted the tape removed. He nodded frantically. When they peeled it off his mouth, the first thing he said was my name. "Barbara. Barbara. I didn't want to sign. He made me. He said if I didn't, that's enough." Jason's calm finally cracked. "Dad's confused. He has good days and bad days. This is a bad day, Mr. Mitchell," the officer said to Raymond. "Do you want to press charges against this man?" Raymond looked at Jason, at the boy we had raised, the child we had chosen when no one else wanted him, the son we had loved and fed and clothed and educated for 34 years. "Yes," Raymond whispered. "I want to press charges." They handcuffed Jason in our living room. Gregory, too, though he protested that he was merely a witness, that he had done nothing wrong. I watched them lead our son out the front door, past the garden I had planted, past the swing set we had built when he was 7, past the basketball hoop where he had practiced free throws until dark. He looked at me as they put him in the patrol car. His eyes were cold, calculating, utterly unfamiliar. "You'll regret this," he said. "I'm your son." I thought about the 47 seconds I had spent watching him torture my husband. I thought about the years of love, the sacrifices, the endless patience. I thought about the boy who had clung to me on his first night in our home, terrified of the dark, terrified of everything. "No," I said quietly. "You're not." They drove away. I went back inside to my husband. He was still sitting in the chair, rubbing his wrists where the tape had left red marks. I knelt beside him and took his hands in mine. "I came home early," I said. "My conference ended a day ahead of schedule. I wanted to surprise you." Raymond's laugh was hollow, broken. "Some surprise. I filmed everything. I have it all on my phone." He looked at me with those eyes I had loved for 40 years, eyes now filled with pain and betrayal and something else, something like shame. "He's our son, Barbara." "I know. We raised him. We loved him." "I know." "How did this happen?" I had no answer. I had raised 2 children in this house, one biological and one adopted, and I had loved them both with everything I had. Melissa had grown into a successful doctor, a kind person, a devoted daughter. Jason had grown into whatever he was now, the same home, the same parents, the same love, 2 completely different outcomes. I sat with Raymond until the detectives arrived. I showed them the video, gave my statement, answered their questions. They told me Jason and Gregory would be held overnight. A judge would set bail in the morning. I should secure any important documents and consider whether Raymond needed medical attention. After they left, I made Raymond a cup of tea and sat with him in the kitchen where we had shared thousands of meals as a family. The clock on the wall read 11:47 p.m. Somewhere across town, our son was being processed into the county jail. "What was he trying to make you sign?" I asked. Raymond stared at his tea. "A new will. Everything to him. Nothing to Melissa. Nothing to Charity. Just Jason." "And Gregory was helping him?" "Gregory wrote the documents. Jason said they'd been planning this for months, waiting for you to travel. He said no one would believe me if I tried to fight it later." Raymond's voice broke. "He said I was getting senile anyway, and everyone would think I'd just changed my mind." I thought about Gregory Simmons, the man we had trusted with our most important legal matters for 30 years. The man who had dined at our table, played with our children, offered Raymond advice on his business dealings. All that time, what had he really been? "How long?" I asked. "How long what?" "How long has Jason been visiting Gregory without us knowing?" Raymond shook his head slowly. "I don't know. Months, at least. Maybe longer. Jason started coming around more about a year ago, remember? Said he wanted to reconnect, to be a better son. I thought..." He laughed bitterly. "I thought he'd finally grown up." I remembered Jason's increased visits, his sudden interest in Raymond's health, his questions about the business, the investments, the property. I had been so happy, so grateful that our prodigal son was finally coming home. I had been so stupid. That night, I lay awake beside Raymond, listening to him breathe, thinking about 47 seconds. 47 seconds of watching my son become someone I didn't recognize. 47 seconds that had changed everything. In the morning, I would call Melissa. I would contact a new lawyer. I would begin the long, painful process of understanding how this had happened. But for now, I just lay in the dark, counting seconds, wondering where I had gone wrong. Jason made bail the next morning. Someone paid $50,000 in cash, and by noon he was walking free. The detective called to tell me. I was sitting with Melissa in the kitchen, having just finished explaining what her brother had done to her father. She had driven 4 hours from her hospital in New Haven the moment I called, arriving before dawn. Dark circles under her eyes and a fury I had never seen in her before. "Who paid his bail?" I demanded. "Anonymous," the detective said. "Bail bondsman wouldn't say. Legal, unfortunately." "And Gregory?" "Same. Someone wanted them both out." I hung up and looked at Melissa. She was 34 years old, a doctor of internal medicine, calm and composed in the face of crisis. But right now, her hands were shaking. "He's out," I said. "I heard. Someone has money behind this. Someone with resources." Melissa stood abruptly and walked to the window. "I need to tell you something, Mom. Something I should have told you months ago." I waited. "Jason came to me in February. He wanted money. Said he had an investment opportunity." She turned to face me. I said no. He got angry, really angry. Said I always thought I was better than him, that you and Dad always favored me, that I was the real daughter and he was just the charity case. He said that? Word for word. I told him that wasn't true, that we loved him exactly the same. He laughed in my face. Said if that were true, I would give him the money without asking questions. She paused. I haven't spoken to him since. I thought about the past year, Jason's sudden renewed interest in the family, his visits to Raymond, his questions about the estate. It had all felt so natural, so welcome. Our distant son finally coming home. It had all been a lie. The doorbell rang. I found 2 FBI agents on my porch, a man and a woman in dark suits with badges displayed. Special Agent Morrison and Special Agent Chen. They asked if they could come in and ask some questions about Gregory Simmons. "Gregory?" I said. "I thought this was a state matter." "It was," Agent Morrison said, "until we found out Gregory Simmons has done this before." They sat in my living room, where Jason had been handcuffed less than 24 hours ago. They told me things about Gregory Simmons that made my stomach turn. In 2019, an elderly widow in Massachusetts had changed her will 3 weeks before dying, leaving everything to a nephew no one knew she had. Gregory Simmons had notarized the documents. In 2017, a retired businessman in New York had transferred power of attorney to a caregiver, who had then drained his accounts. Gregory Simmons had facilitated the transfer. In 2015, in 2012, in 2009, a pattern stretching back 15 years. "He's a predator," Agent Chen said quietly. "He targets elderly people with money. He finds someone close to them, someone who needs cash, someone he can manipulate. He provides the legal framework, takes his cut, and disappears before anyone realizes what happened. And you think Jason was his latest recruit? We know he was. We've been investigating Simmons for 18 months. Your son's name came up in surveillance about 3 months ago. Regular meetings at a coffee shop in Hartford, cash exchanges. We didn't know what they were planning, just that something was happening. Why didn't you warn us?" Agent Morrison looked uncomfortable. "We didn't have enough evidence. And frankly, we didn't expect Simmons to target someone this close. Usually he's more careful about maintaining distance." I thought about Gregory at our dinner table, laughing at Raymond's jokes, complimenting my cooking, playing the role of trusted friend for 30 years. All that time, what had he been watching? What had he been planning? "How did they meet?" I asked. "Jason and Gregory. How did this start?" "We're still piecing that together. Best we can tell, your son reached out to Simmons about a year ago, looking for legal advice on some business dealings. Simmons saw an opportunity. Jason went to Gregory. Apparently, the FBI agents left me with their cards and instructions to call if Jason tried to contact us. They said to secure all important documents, change the locks, install a security system. They said we should consider a protective order. A protective order. Against my own son. After they left, I went upstairs to check on Raymond. He had barely slept, barely eaten, barely spoken since the night before. I found him sitting in his office, staring at the chair where Jason had restrained him. The tape was gone, but the marks remained on the leather armrests. "The FBI was here," I said. He didn't look up. "I know. I heard. Gregory has done this before. To other families." Jason reached out to him. Still no response. "Raymond, talk to me." He finally turned. His eyes were red, hollow, defeated. "I keep thinking about the day we brought him home, remember? He was 6 years old. He hid behind you the whole drive. Wouldn't look at me. Wouldn't speak." I remembered. Jason had been in the foster system for 2 years after his biological parents lost custody. Abuse, neglect, things I couldn't bear to think about. He had been so small, So scared, so desperate for safety. I promised him, Raymond said. That first night, after you went to sleep, I sat by his bed and promised him that no one would ever hurt him again. I promised I would always protect him. You did protect him. We both did. Then how did he become this? I had no answer. I had asked myself the same question 1,000 times in the past 24 hours. He made choices, I finally said. We gave him everything we could. Love, stability, education, opportunities. He made choices. Did we give him enough? We gave him the same as Melissa. Exactly the same. Did we? Raymond's voice cracked. Did we really? Or did we always hold something back, some little piece of ourselves because he wasn't really ours? I wanted to deny it. I wanted to say that I had loved Jason with my whole heart, that there had never been any difference, that biology meant nothing. But in that moment, I couldn't be sure. Had there been moments when I had reached for Melissa first? Times when I had been harder on Jason, less patient, less forgiving? Had he sensed something in us? Some buried reservation? Some unconscious hierarchy of love? And if he had, did that justify what he had done? It doesn't matter, I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. Whatever mistakes we made, they don't excuse this. Nothing excuses this. The phone rang. I answered without looking at the caller ID. Hello, Mother. Jason's voice was calm, controlled, exactly like it had been in the office. I put him on speaker so Raymond could hear. You shouldn't be calling us, I said. We're supposed to go through lawyers. I just wanted to talk, to explain. There's nothing to explain. There's everything to explain. You don't understand the pressure I've been under. The debts. The people who were going to hurt me if I didn't pay. Gregory said this was the only way. Gregory is a predator who's been doing this for 15 years, and you helped him. A pause. When Jason spoke again, his voice had lost some of its composure. He promised me no one would get hurt. He said Dad would sign, we'd wait a few years, and then everything would be natural. He said, You taped your father to a chair. You forced a pen into his hand. You made him cry. I was desperate, Mom. I owed $500,000 to people who don't take no for an answer. Raymond spoke for the first time. So you decided to put me in one instead? Silence on the line. You could have come to us, Raymond continued. You could have told us you were in trouble. We would have helped. We've always helped. Right. Like you helped when I asked for money for the business? Like you helped when I needed a loan for the car? Every time I asked for anything, there were conditions. Melissa asks, she gets. I ask, I get a lecture about responsibility. I thought about Jason's requests over the years, the business that had failed, the car he had crashed, the apartment we had paid for, the debts we had covered, the second chances we had given. Had we really been that different with Melissa? Or was this just the story Jason told himself to justify what he had become? This conversation is over, I said. Don't call again. Mom, I hung up. That night, I lay awake again, replaying the conversation. $500,000. People who had hurt him. Desperation. It wasn't an excuse, but it was an explanation. And somewhere in the dark corners of my mind, a question formed that I couldn't silence. Had we created this? Had our love not been enough? Had we somehow failed the boy we had promised to save? I didn't sleep that night either. 3 weeks after Jason's arrest, Raymond collapsed in the bathroom. I found him on the floor, unconscious, his face gray, his breathing shallow. The ambulance came in 8 minutes. By the time we reached the hospital, his heart had stopped twice. He survived, barely. The doctors said it was a combination of stress, his existing heart condition, and something else. Something that showed up in his blood work that shouldn't have been there. Diazepam, a sedative, in quantities far exceeding any prescription. Someone's been drugging him, Dr. Chen said, his face grim. For weeks, maybe months. The levels suggest regular administration. Mr. Mitchell, has anyone been giving you medication recently? Raymond, still weak but alert, shook his head. Just my regular prescriptions. Barbara handles those. I haven't given him anything different, I said. I would never. We're not accusing you, Mrs. Mitchell. but someone has been administering this drug regularly. It would explain confusion, suggestibility, impaired memory. If you noticed your husband seeming more forgetful lately, more compliant, this could be why. I thought back over the past few months. Raymond forgetting conversations we'd had. Raymond agreeing to things he normally wouldn't. Raymond seeming foggy, distant, not quite himself. I had attributed it to age, to stress, to the normal decline of a 70-year-old man with heart problems. I had been wrong. Jason was visiting regularly, I said slowly. He would bring Raymond coffee, tea. They would sit in the office together for hours. Dr. Chen nodded. That would be consistent with what we're seeing. If your son was adding small amounts of diazepam to beverages, over time the cumulative effect would be significant. Mr. Mitchell would have become increasingly confused, increasingly susceptible to suggestion. He might have signed documents without fully understanding what he was doing. I looked at Raymond. He was staring at the ceiling, tears rolling silently down his cheeks. He was poisoning me, Raymond whispered. Our son was poisoning me. I called Agent Morrison immediately. Within 2 hours, FBI agents were at our house, searching Jason's old room, collecting samples from the kitchen, dusting for prints. They found a half-empty bottle of diazepam hidden in the back of the linen closet, prescribed to a name I didn't recognize. Forged prescription, Morrison said. Classic Simmons move. How long? I asked. How long was he drugging my husband? Based on the blood work and the amount remaining in the bottle. At least 3 months, maybe longer. 3 months. For 3 months, while I had been working, traveling, living my normal life, my son had been slowly poisoning my husband, making him confused, making him vulnerable, making him ready to sign away everything. Melissa arrived that evening, having taken emergency leave from the hospital. She examined her father herself, reviewed his charts, consulted with the attending physicians. When she emerged from his room, her face was white with fury. The diazepam levels explain everything, she said. The confusion, the passivity, the uncharacteristic behavior. Dad was essentially being chemically manipulated. His judgment was impaired. His resistance was lowered. His memory was affected. By the time Jason got him in that chair, Dad might not have fully understood what was happening. So when Jason said Raymond wanted to change his will, Dad couldn't have wanted anything. He wasn't capable of rational decision-making. He was drugged. Melissa's voice shook. This wasn't just elder abuse, Mom. This was premeditated, planned, systematic. They were breaking Dad down for months before the final push. I thought about Jason's visits, the coffee he brought, the conversations I had thought were so touching, a son reconnecting with his father, the concerned way he had mentioned that Dad seemed forgetful lately, that maybe we should think about what happens if Dad's memory gets worse. He had been laying the groundwork, building a narrative, preparing witnesses who would later testify that Raymond Mitchell had been declining for months, that of course he would want to update his will, that his devoted son Jason was only trying to help. The depth of the planning was staggering. The patience, the cruelty. This wasn't desperation. This was calculation. The next morning, Agent Morrison called with more news. They had obtained Gregory Simmons's records, and what they found painted an even darker picture. Gregory had done this at least 7 times over 15 years. 7 elderly victims, all with significant assets, all with complicated family dynamics. In each case, he had found someone close to the victim, someone with access and motive, and recruited them to help. The collaborator would manipulate the victim while Gregory provided the legal framework. When the victim died or became incapacitated, the assets were divided between the conspirators. In 3 of those cases, the victim had died within 6 months of the will change. In one case, the death had been ruled suspicious but never prosecuted. Gregory Simmons had been invisible, just a lawyer who happened to notarize some documents, never connected to the crimes. Until now. Your husband is lucky, Morrison said. In most cases, we don't catch them until it's too late. You coming home early probably saved his life. Saved his life. The words echoed in my head. If I hadn't come home early, if my conference hadn't ended a day ahead of schedule, if I had stopped for dinner on the way back, what would have happened? Would Raymond have signed the documents? Would Jason have continued drugging him until his heart gave out? Would I have come home to a widowed life, a grieving family, a will that left everything to the son who had murdered my husband? The thought was too terrible to hold. I visited Raymond that afternoon. He was sitting up in bed, some color returned to his cheeks, but his eyes held a hollowness that I recognized. He was replaying the same thoughts I was, the what-ifs, the near misses, the terrible understanding of how close we had come to disaster. "I keep thinking about the coffee," he said. "Every time he brought me coffee, I was so happy. I thought he was finally being a good son. I know. I would thank him. I would tell him how much I appreciated him visiting. And the whole time He couldn't finish. I took his hand. The skin was papery, thin, marked with age spots and hospital tape. These hands had built houses, held our children, held me for 40 years. Now they trembled with weakness and betrayal. "It's not your fault," I said. "I should have seen it. You were being drugged. You couldn't see anything." I trusted him. Even when he asked me to sign things, I trusted him. We both trusted him. Raymond turned to look at me. "Barbara, when this is over, when the trial is done and everything is settled, I don't want to hear his name again. I don't want to see his face. I want him gone from our lives." I nodded slowly. "So do I." He stopped being our son the moment he wrapped that tape around my wrists. I thought about Jason at 6 years old, hiding behind my legs, terrified of the world. I thought about Jason at 16, getting his driver's license, beaming with pride. All those memories, all those years of love, gone now, poisoned, like the coffee he had brought his father. "I know," I said. "I know." That night, I sat alone in the hospital chapel, staring at the stained glass windows, thinking about motherhood and love and the children we raise and the strangers they become. I had given Jason everything. I had loved him as my own. I had fought for him, protected him, believed in him even when others doubted. And he had repaid that love with poison and tape and terror. Somewhere along the way, he had made a choice. Not a desperate choice, not a momentary lapse, but a calculated, sustained, deliberate choice to destroy us for money. And now I had to make a choice too. I would see this through. I would testify against my son. I would watch him go to prison. And then I would do what Raymond asked. I would forget he ever existed. The arraignment was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in March. Jason and Gregory were charged together. Conspiracy to commit elder abuse, fraud, assault, and attempted theft by deception. Federal charges for the interstate fraud conspiracy would follow. I sat in the front row of the courtroom, Melissa beside me, Raymond home recovering with a nurse. I watched my son shuffle in wearing an orange jumpsuit, his wrists shackled, his face blank. He didn't look at me. Gregory Simmons entered separately, looking smaller than I remembered, older, diminished. The expensive suits and confident smile were gone, replaced by the same orange fabric as Jason, the same shackled wrists, the same defeated slump. The prosecutor laid out the case methodically. The drugging, the forged documents, the history of similar crimes, the pattern of predation. When she mentioned that this was Gregory's 7th known victim, a murmur rippled through the courtroom. Jason's lawyer tried to argue for leniency. His client was a victim too, he said, manipulated by a seasoned predator, in debt to dangerous people, desperate. He had no prior record. He deserved a chance at rehabilitation. I watched Jason's face while his lawyer spoke. There was no shame there, no remorse, just calculation. He was still thinking about angles, still looking for ways out. When the lawyer finished, the judge set bail at $200,000 for Jason, $500,000 for Gregory. Neither could pay. They would remain in custody until trial. As the officers led him out, Jason finally looked at me. His eyes locked onto mine across the courtroom, and for a moment, I saw something flicker there. Anger? Resentment? Or just the cold assessment of a predator sizing up his prey? Then he was gone, and I was left sitting in the hard wooden pew, wondering who that person was and how he had replaced my son. 2 weeks later, I went to see him. Raymond didn't know. Melissa didn't know. I told them I was going to a doctor's appointment and drove 45 minutes to the county jail. I sat in the visitation room with its bolted-down chairs and scratched plexiglass dividers, and I waited. When they brought Jason in, he looked surprised to see me. He sat down slowly, picked up the phone on his side of the glass. I picked up mine. "Mother," he said. No warmth, no remorse, just the word. "Jason, I didn't think you'd come." Neither did I. We sat in silence for a moment. Around us, other families cried and pleaded and reassured. A woman at the next booth was promising her son that everything would be okay, that she would hire a better lawyer, that she would always love him. I felt nothing like that. "I want to understand," I finally said. "I want to know how we got here." Jason laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "You want to understand? Now? After you had me arrested? After you filmed me like I was some kind of criminal? You are a criminal. You drugged your father. You strapped him to a chair. You tried to steal everything he built. He wasn't going to give it to me anyway." Jason's composure cracked. "Everything goes to Melissa. That's how it's always been. The perfect daughter. The doctor. The one you actually love. That's not true, isn't it? When Melissa graduated med school, you threw a party for 50 people. When I got my business degree, you took me to dinner at Applebee's. Jason, that was 15 years ago. It was a pattern, Mom. My whole life was a pattern. Melissa gets the good stuff. Jason gets the leftovers." He leaned closer to the glass. "You know what Dad told me once? He said he was proud of me. And then he said, 'Not as proud as I am of Melissa, but still proud. Not as proud.' He actually said that." I tried to remember the moment he was describing. Had Raymond really said that? Had we really treated them so differently? Or was this the story Jason had constructed to justify his actions? "Even if that were true," I said carefully, "even if we made mistakes, that doesn't excuse what you did. I was going to die, Mom. I owed $500,000 to people who break legs for late payments. Gregory showed me a way out. Gregory showed you how to prey on your own father. Gregory showed me how to survive." Jason slammed his hand against the glass. A guard looked over, tensed, then relaxed when Jason sat back. "You have no idea what it's like, to be desperate, to have no options. You've never struggled a day in your life." I thought about the years Raymond and I had spent building our business. The late nights, the failed ventures, the near bankruptcy in 1998 that we had never told the children about. But I didn't say any of that, because I realized, in that moment, that Jason didn't want to understand. He wanted to blame. He wanted to make us the villains so he could live with what he had done. "I came here to tell you something," I said quietly. Jason's eyes narrowed. "What?" "I loved you. From the moment we brought you home, I loved you as my son. Every birthday, every Christmas, every ordinary Tuesday. I loved you. I sat by your bed when you were sick. I held you when you were scared. I cheered at your games and cried at your graduation and believed in you even when you gave me no reason to." Jason said nothing. "You were not a charity case. You were not a leftover. You were my child, chosen and wanted and loved." I felt tears building but refused to let them fall. "And maybe we made mistakes. Maybe we weren't perfect parents. But we never stopped loving you. Never. Then why?" "Let me finish." I took a breath. "I came here to tell you that I loved you, and I came here to tell you goodbye." The word hung in the air between us. "Goodbye?" Jason's voice wavered for the first time. "After the trial, after you're sentenced, I will never see you again. I will never write. I will never visit. I will never speak your name." I stood up, still holding the phone. "You stopped being my son the moment you drugged your father, the moment you wrapped that tape around his wrists, the moment you chose money over family. Mom, I gave you everything I had for 34 years. You took it all and threw it away for $500,000. I looked at him one last time. "Goodbye, Jason." I hung up the phone and walked away. Behind me, I heard him shouting, heard his fist pounding the glass, heard the guards moving to restrain him. I didn't turn around. I walked through the security doors, past the visitation check-in, out into the parking lot where the March wind cut through my coat. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, shaking, not crying, just shaking. When I finally drove home, Raymond was asleep in his chair by the window. I sat beside him and watched him breathe, and I thought about the boy I had adopted and the man he had become. I had done what I needed to do. I had said what I needed to say. Now all that remained was the trial. The trial began in September, 6 months after the arrest. I had spent those months rebuilding. Raymond grew stronger every day, the drugs slowly clearing from his system, his mind sharpening, his spirit recovering. We changed lawyers, updated our will, installed security cameras, and sold the house on Maple Lane. Too many memories, too many ghosts. We moved to a smaller place closer to the hospital, closer to Melissa, closer to the new life we were trying to build. Raymond tended a small garden in the backyard. I joined a book club. We had dinner with Melissa every Sunday. We never spoke Jason's name. But the trial brought it all back. The courtroom was packed on the first day. Media had picked up the story. Elderly judge drugged and assaulted by adopted son. Predatory lawyer with 15-year history of fraud. It was the kind of case that made headlines. I sat in the front row, Raymond beside me, Melissa on my other side. For the first time since the jail visit, I saw Jason. He looked different, thinner, paler. The cockiness was gone, replaced by something I couldn't quite read. He glanced at me when they brought him in, then quickly looked away. Gregory sat at a separate table, his own lawyer beside him. He looked worse than Jason. Older, grayer, diminished. The weight of his crimes seemed to have aged him decades in months. The prosecutor began with the video. My 47 seconds of footage played on a large screen for the jury. Raymond strapped to the chair, Jason forcing the pen, Gregory checking his watch. The silence of the room was absolute as they watched my son torture my husband. When it ended, a woman in the jury box was crying. Then came the testimony. Agent Morrison described the investigation, the pattern of crimes, the other victims. A forensic accountant explained how Gregory had hidden his tracks for 15 years. A pharmacologist detailed the effects of diazepam on an elderly patient. The confusion, the suggestibility, the danger. And then it was Raymond's turn. He walked slowly to the witness stand, using a cane now, his heart too weak for the man who had once built houses with his bare hands. He sat down, took the oath, and began to speak. I remember waking up that night and not knowing where I was, he said. His voice was steady but soft. I remember Jason coming into my office with coffee. I remember feeling strange, foggy, like I was watching myself from outside my body. The prosecutor guided him through the events, the tape, the pen, the documents, the terror. What were you thinking when your son wrapped that tape around your wrists? Raymond was quiet for a long moment. I was thinking that I was going to die. I was thinking that my son was going to kill me. I was thinking about my wife, and how she would come home and find me dead in that chair. Did you want to sign those documents? No. I tried to say no, but the tape was on my mouth. I tried to shake my head, but Jason held it still. I tried to drop the pen, but he forced it back into my hand. Raymond's voice broke. I thought if I could just hold on long enough, something would happen. Someone would come. Barbara would come. And she did. Yes. Raymond looked at me across the courtroom. She came home early. She saved my life. The defense lawyer's cross-examination was brief. He knew there was nothing to salvage. Raymond answered calmly, clearly, devastatingly. When he stepped down from the stand, he walked past Jason's table. For a moment, he stopped. The courtroom held its breath. I chose you, Raymond said quietly, but loud enough for everyone to hear. When no one else wanted you, I chose you. I gave you my name. I gave you my home. I gave you my love. Jason stared at the table, unable to meet his father's eyes. And you chose this, Raymond continued. You chose to drug me, to terrorize me, to steal from me. I will never understand why, and I will never forgive you. He walked back to his seat beside me. I took his hand. His grip was weak but steady. Jason never looked up. The next day, it was my turn. I described the 47 seconds in detail. The counting, The filming, the call to 911, the careful, deliberate steps I had taken to document everything before acting. Why didn't you intervene immediately? The prosecutor asked. Because I knew I needed evidence. I knew Gregory would deny everything. I knew Jason would have an explanation. I knew that without proof, it would be my word against theirs. And now you have proof. Now I have 47 seconds of proof. The defense lawyer tried to rattle me. He suggested that I had exaggerated what I saw, that Raymond had been confused and consented to the will change, that Jason was only trying to help his father sign documents. I looked at him steadily. I know what I saw. I have it on video. My husband was crying, gagged with tape, restrained to a chair. There is no interpretation of that footage that makes it consensual. He had no follow-up. The final testimony came from an unexpected source. Gregory Simmons's former assistant, a young woman named Claire who had worked for him for 3 years before quitting in 2020. She had come forward after seeing the news. I suspected something was wrong, she said. Mr. Simmons would have me file documents for elderly clients that seemed strange. Will changes that happened very quickly. Power of attorney transfers that seemed rushed. I asked him about it once and he told me to mind my own business. Why did you quit? Because a client died the week after changing his will. An 82-year-old man who had been perfectly healthy. And Mr. Simmons didn't seem surprised at all. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. They found Jason guilty on all counts. Conspiracy, elder abuse, assault, fraud. They found Gregory guilty on 17 counts spanning 15 years. When the verdict was read, Jason finally broke. He put his head in his hands and wept. Gregory sat motionless, staring straight ahead, already somewhere else in his mind. I watched my son cry and felt nothing. The sentencing came 3 weeks later. Gregory received 25 years, effectively a life sentence for a 60-year-old man. Jason received 12 years. Before the judge pronounced sentence, Jason was given a chance to speak. He stood slowly, handcuffed, dressed in a suit his public defender had provided. He looked at me, then at Raymond, then at Melissa. I know sorry isn't enough, he said. His voice was hoarse, broken. I know nothing I say can fix what I did, but I want you to know that I regret it. Every day since that night, I've regretted it. He paused, struggling for composure. You were good parents. You were, and I threw it away. I let Gregory convince me that I deserved more, that you owed me something, that what we were doing wasn't really wrong. But I knew. I knew the whole time that it was wrong, and I did it anyway. He looked directly at me. Mom, I'm sorry. I held his gaze for a long moment. Then I looked away. The judge pronounced the sentence. The officers led Jason out. As he passed our row, he slowed, as if hoping I might say something, reach out, offer some final word of connection. I kept my eyes forward. The door closed behind him. It was done. We moved again after the trial. A cottage in Vermont, near a lake, far from everything that had happened. Raymond wanted peace. I wanted silence. We found both. The first winter was hard. Raymond's health continued to decline, his heart weakened by the trauma, his spirit slower to recover than his body. But as spring arrived, something shifted. He began to garden again. He started reading books he'd been meaning to read for decades. He laughed at jokes on television, really laughed, not the hollow sound he'd made in the months after the attack. We never spoke of Jason. His name became a silence, a shape we walked around, an absence we learned to live with. Melissa visited every few weeks, and she too avoided the topic. The three of us rebuilt our family as a triangle where there had once been 4 points. It was enough. It had to be enough. In June, I received a letter. I recognized the return address immediately, the correctional facility where Jason was serving his sentence. I held the envelope for a long time, feeling its weight, imagining what words it might contain. Then I walked to the fireplace, struck a match, and burned it without opening. Raymond watched from his chair. Was that from him? Yes. What did it say? I don't know. I didn't read it. He nodded slowly. Good. More letters came over the following months. I burned them all. Eventually, they stopped. I don't know what Jason wanted to say. An apology, probably. An explanation. A plea for forgiveness or understanding or some scrap of connection to the family he had tried to destroy. It didn't matter. Whatever words he had, I didn't need them. On the anniversary of the attack, I did something I had been putting off for a year. I went through the boxes we had brought from the old house, the boxes I had labeled Jason and shoved into the garage, unable to deal with them in the chaos of the trial and the move. There were photo albums, baby pictures from the adoption agency. Jason at 7, learning to ride a bike. Jason at 10, dressed as a pirate for Halloween. Jason at 16, holding his first paycheck from his first job. Jason at 22, graduating from college, beaming at the camera. While Raymond and I stood proudly on either side, I looked at each photograph carefully, trying to see the man who would become a monster in the boy who had been my son. There was nothing, just a child, just a teenager, just a young man who smiled at the camera and hugged his parents, and seemed, in every way, like the son we had tried to raise. At what point had he changed? Or had he always been this way, hiding his true nature behind the facade of a loving son? Had the resentment been building for years, invisible to us, festering in silence? Until Gregory gave him permission to let it out? I would never know. And perhaps that was the hardest part. Raymond found me in the garage, photographs spread around me, my cheeks wet with tears I hadn't noticed falling. "Barbara," he said softly. "I'm trying to understand," I said. "I'm looking at these pictures, and I'm trying to see where we went wrong." He knelt beside me, slowly, painfully, his old bones protesting. He picked up a photograph of Jason at 6, the day we brought him home. The terrified little boy who had hidden behind my legs. "We didn't go wrong," he said. "We loved him. We did everything we could." "Then why?" "Because love isn't magic. It doesn't guarantee anything. We gave him every chance. He made his choices." I looked at the photograph in his hands. The little boy with the frightened eyes. The child I had promised to protect. "I still miss him," I whispered. "Not the man he became. The child he was. The son I thought I had." "I know." Raymond put his arm around me. "I miss him too." We sat there for a long time, surrounded by photographs of a boy who no longer existed, mourning a son who had never really been ours. That evening, we built a fire in the living room. One by one, I fed the photographs to the flames. Baby pictures, school photos, graduation portraits, Christmas mornings and birthday parties and family vacations. 34 years of memories. Curling and blackening and turning to ash. Melissa had come to visit that weekend. She stood beside me watching the photos burn. "Are you sure?" she asked. "Yes. There's no going back after this. There's already no going back." I picked up the last photograph. Jason at 30, smiling at the camera, looking like the perfect son. He made sure of that. I dropped it into the fire. The flames consumed it quickly, greedily, erasing his face from our lives. We stood in silence until the fire died down. 3 people where there had once been 4. A family reduced but not destroyed. Raymond took my hand. Melissa took the other. "It's done," I said. And it was. In the years that followed, I sometimes thought about those 47 seconds, the longest seconds of my life, the seconds that had changed everything. If I had acted sooner, would it have mattered? If I had burst through the door screaming, would Jason have stopped? Would Gregory have fled? Would Raymond have been saved or harmed further by my intervention? I would never know. All I knew was that I had counted and waited and filmed and called for help. I had done what I could with what I had, and it had been enough. Raymond lived for 4 more years. His heart finally gave out on a quiet Tuesday morning in October, while he was reading in his chair by the window. I found him with a book still open in his lap, a peaceful expression on his face. At his funeral, Melissa and I stood together, receiving condolences from friends and neighbors, many of whom knew the story, many of whom had followed the trial. No one mentioned Jason. No one asked about him. He had become what he deserved to be, forgotten. Afterward, sorting through Raymond's things, I found a letter he had written and never sent. It was addressed to Jason. I almost burned it without reading, but something stopped me. I opened it. Jason, it read, I am writing this knowing I will never send it. There are things I need to say, even if only to myself. I loved you. From the first day to the last, I loved you as my son. Whatever failures I had as a father, whatever mistakes I made, my love was never one of them. You did a terrible thing. You hurt me in ways I will never fully recover from. You destroyed something precious that can never be rebuilt. But I want you to know that I don't hate you. I can't. Hatred requires energy I no longer have. Instead, I feel a sadness so deep it has no bottom. A grief for the son I thought I had. A mourning for the man you might have become. I hope, somewhere in that prison, you find a way to become someone better. I hope you find peace, even though you took mine. I hope you learn to be the person we tried to raise you to be. I will never see you again. I will never speak to you again. But I will carry you with me until the end. Your father, Raymond. I read the letter 3 times. Then I folded it carefully and placed it in the fire. Some doors, once closed, stay closed forever. But that doesn't mean we stop loving the people on the other side. It just means we learn to love them from a distance so great they can never hurt us again.